Hello. I want to talk to you guys about the question that often comes up in regards to sexual modesty, and especially it comes up in regards to women or even girls. And an apologist who defends the double standard in sexual modesty will often ask you this question in terms of how liberal you want your daughter to be sexually. The question that they ask is that, would you want your daughter to sleep around? Would you want your daughter to sleep around with every different guy every single night, or a guy every single week? And a man usually asks this question. A man usually asks this question as a means to apologize for the double standard in sexual modesty. And he'll say that, okay, would you want your daughter to sleep around with a different guy every day, or would you want your daughter to sleep around with a guy every other day or a week, as opposed to your son? And if you answer that question honestly, for most men, you would say that you'd have more problems with your daughter sleeping around than with your son sleeping around, as an emotional response. And sleeping around, I don't mean sleeping around is just a very general term. I'm just using a certain type of hyperbole, but the bottom line is this: that as a father, you probably focus on your daughter being more sexually selective than your son. You may focus on your son promiscuous actions as a means of degrading women or as a means of disrespecting women, but your son does not lose value or respect when he sleeps around with other women. Okay, so even if you try to defend modesty and try to apply it so-called equally to men, you still see a different standard. Okay. So let's tackle this issue about our daughters being sexualized, our daughters wanting to have anal sex, our daughters wanting to have blowjobs, because we're going to have to be very blunt with this. Okay, we have to get down to the source. Okay, the bottom line is this: our daughters are not different. Our daughters should not be told to be different than the women that we find, even if they're our wives. They can't be different than the women that we sexualize, and that could be it can definitely be our wives. It could be our girlfriends. Okay, they can't be different. Okay, they're a sexual creature. They're a sexual creature who can possibly want multiple partners, even multiple partners simultaneously. Okay. Yes, your daughter might like anal sex with two guys, just like your son may want to have sex with two women. Okay. That's just the bottom line. You have to deal with it. That's the reality of the situation. And this notion that gives you a hint that purity is true, or women should have this certain type of purity based upon your desire to want your daughter to not engage in sexual acts that you don't want to picture your daughter having, is just not illogical. It's just not good enough. Okay. That's your emotional response. So, now, of course, you can justify some type of protection. There's some dangers of being promiscuous as a woman that are relatively less dangerous than a man. Or, okay, you can be a father and want to be cautious, but once you cross the line and say that your emotional response of being uneasy with your daughter wanting to have sex with men, simultaneously wanting to have phone sex, that doesn't prove that shows that you have an emotional response different than when you have with a man, with your son. Okay. The problem is that you have to somehow rationalize it and ask yourself, is it justified? And yes, in some certain context, you can justify. But in a general domain context, you say that it's okay for your son to sleep around when he's single at 22, as opposed to your daughter, and say that your daughter should have more morals is a misogynistic double standard. You have to demonstrate why they should. Okay? You can't just simply say it out of your own emotional response. Why? Why? Because I was talking to this apologist, and he was adamant about it. He was saying that this is just social convention. This is how our society is structured. Well, why is it structured that way? Why? You can't be emotionally invested into something. You can be emotionally invested in something and have absolutely no reason to justify why you're emotionally invested in it. Okay? This is not, morality is not like, people. Okay? I like this person, so therefore I can do certain things based on the reason that I like them. Morality, moral codes you can't select moral codes or be loyal to moral codes simply on emotional investment. So I'm going to be blunt. Your daughter may like to have blowjobs, may want to have a blowjob, may want to give a blowjob. Okay? That's the reality that us as fathers have to realize. Okay? And we can't sit there and say, well, we got to have a different standard because they're our daughters as opposed to our sons. Okay? So this is the reality that you must deal with. It doesn't prove that sexual modesty exists at all. The question of whether you want your daughter to be a stripper, the question should be whether it matters what your opinion, whether your opinion matters. And it's not I'm not trying to be arrogant about this, but does your opinion really matter if she really wants to be a stripper and if she enjoys stripping? Yes, the image that we see in our brains is going to be uncomfortable. That doesn't prove or justify sexual modesty. Okay? Just because you're more comfortable with your son being a stripper as a male, as opposed to your daughter, doesn't justify or prove sexual modesty, especially being targeted toward women. Okay. Now, this is some of the stuff. Now, I haven't heard Steve Harvey. I haven't heard many of his comments, but, some of these things, I'm not saying Steve Harvey specifically talks about these things, but part of his new modesty is probably rooted in that his daughter, he has this Madonna horror complex of his daughter, and if he realized, or if it was a reality that his daughter liked having sex in a certain way, in a casual way, and when it had sex for pure recreation, it would destroy, it would destroy his image of his daughter. Our daughters have the right to be sexual. And if you continue to promote a modesty mythology of a Madonna whore complex, which is based on pure myth and based on pure emotion, you are contributing in some ways to, maybe not to your daughter if she agrees with this type of mentality. You might not be contributing to your daughter being uneasy, but you're contributing to other women who don't want to follow this mythology, which is a pure myth. How do you lose value? Where did we get the idea that you maintain value by being sexually selective? In the most fundamental, essential sense, that your value as a person is determined by how many partners you sleep with. The more partners you sleep with, the higher risk you become less valued. That is a myth. Now, obviously, we're not going to be comfortable with our daughters having sex, picturing our daughters having sex, because we are the fathers. And most of us have an incest-phobic nature. So, this isn't proof. This clearly just explains why there's a sexual modesty double standard. Bill O'Reilly, I'm not saying Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly explains, kind of illuminates, not the double standard, but why he must keep sexual modesty, because he asks. I think he asked one of the I don't know, one of the strippers. It was a couple years back. Would you want your daughter to do it? It's always the daughter. You always know, do you want your daughter to be a stripper? Do you want your daughter to be an adult? It's always the female. And yes, you could say that, well, there's a far more female strippers. I understand that. But we understand that there are male adult stars. And we also know that there's male strippers. Okay. That's a reality. Okay. So that's the problem. Okay. You have to get over it. You cannot sit there. You cannot, if a woman has a sexual nature, high sexual nature, and it's extremely sexual and can have sexuality outside the bounds of a benevolent romantic relationship, okay, you're not going to convince her, because you're not going to convince her to be quote unquote pure, because you're uncomfortable with her being a sexual creature. Why would she believe you? Why should she conform to what you want? It's based on what you want. And the problem is not her, it's you. Okay? It's you. So you have to fix yourself. Until you have evidence, or you have something concrete based on reality, that intrinsically she will suffer. Her soul will suffer because she's promiscuous. You're not quote unquote promiscuous, but she is sexual. She is sexual in the manner that you would allow your son to be. It's just not good enough. So I hope I address this. Again, I'm going to continue to address this area of sexual modesty, because it's very important. And I hope you understand why I will never fall for this type of reasoning. So, on that note, have a nice day.